Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. It's 2022, and that means Kodak film prices are astronomically high, and another white guy is making a video about his photography to put on YouTube for the masses to enjoy. So I took a New Year's Eve trip to Solvang, which is a Dutch. I took a trip to Solvang recently to shoot some film. I've recently been developing everything in-house, and so this was kind of my first trip to go make work, come back, develop it, scan it, and then kind of instantly see if I fucked up or not. And to my surprise, I did not fuck it up. And I actually have 10 photos that I'd like to go over and talk with you today, as well as talk about some of my photography goals of 2022 and yeah. So this was the first shot of the roll, and with every first shot of any roll, you'd be hard pressed to take a really good photo. To me, this scene looked really interesting in person, and I'm still on the fence about how it translated in the photographic medium. What drew me to this scene was the I Spy quality of it. You have the planters in the back, the rusted grill in the back as well, the tree stumps, the different types of shrubbery, the shadow work, the way the light grazes the ground, and that barn behind all of it. And this is something that I try or have been trying to be more cognizant of when making my photos, is trying not to get too bogged down on the fact that it is a two-dimensional medium. Trying to add more depth in my photos, whether that be foreground elements, as you see here with the shrubbery on the left, midground, background, also playing with the highlights and the shadows, trying to have a more well-rounded image. And this is something that I was trying to do with this photo, but the jury's still out on if I succeeded with that. I do think overall it's very busy. So I think next time if I approach a scene like this, I might photograph it maybe a little bit differently, knowing what I know with this photo. Now this is something a little different, and it kind of breaks the rules I was talking about in the previous photo. This photo clearly lacks depth, but I think for this type of frame, I think it works. First off, the dominating color is green. There's a strong palette here. And then you have the different types of shapes of the windows, the angular shape of that gate, that little mailbox in front, and then the arching of the shrubbery around it, framing the entranceway to this house quite nicely. Like I mentioned previously, the lighting in this is incredibly flat. You do get some contrast inside the bush, where the leaves fall to pure shadow. But overall, everything that the light is touching is flatly lit. And when I came across this area, I normally don't like taking flat images. But what really struck me about this was that strong color palette of green and like that beigey green paint that you do see on the gate, on the windows, on the door, on the paneling of the home. It all kind of flows within that same color palette. And I think that's why I was drawn to it and decided to spend now what is $1.40, thanks Kodak, on this photo. It's when you're photographing with color, sometimes focusing on a palette and scenes that contain that palette, I think sometimes it can lead to a good image. And I'm happy with how I framed it. I'm happy with the subject matter. Yeah, let's move on. So this photo here, there's really not much to talk about. It's kind of very simple. I do think this is one of the weaker selections of this roll. But I approached the scene and I tried to incorporate my foreground, midground, and background, like I mentioned previously. So the foreground, obviously, you have this out of focus fence with this rose, I believe, kind of flying off out of focus into the right third of the frame. The tree in the swing in the midground. The swing was basically the subject of the photo, and I just wanted to figure out how to frame this scene to the best of my ability. And I think with the shadow work on the ground and the angle of the fence in the roses, I'm very happy with that. I think the house in the back, I don't know. It's something about the lighting. It's a little off to me, but overall, I think the scene, it isn't the best of the roll, but I am happy with how it came out. I came across this truck in a parking lot, and this is one of those images where it's going to be hit or miss. I mean, I don't know if this truck looks like this year round. I would imagine it doesn't because it has Christmas stuff all over it. But, and I normally do not like photographing cars. I think, especially now, it's a overplayed, overused, oversaturated technique. I think there's better things to photograph, personally speaking. And so when I choose to photograph a vehicle, there needs to be something about it that makes me want to spend the time, the money, the effort developing it, scanning it. I approach a scene and I think, do I want to go about scanning it, developing it, scanning it? Is it worth my time? And I think a photo like this, when I look back at some of my favorite photo books by Stephen Shore, there's a certain quality to this image that does remove it from time a little bit. The car, yes, is a little modern, but it's not incredibly modern where you're taken out of the photo, you're taken out of the scene. In my opinion, I think you are more drawn to the horse on top, the garland kind of wrapped around the roof and dangling off the side. I'm happy with that I chose to photograph the car like this with some depth in the back. I believe I originally approached this scene kind of from the side, so the car was directly in the middle, and I think that would have created a flat image. So I guess a lesson here is when you approach a scene that triggers something in you that you want to go photograph, walk around the scene a bit, feel it out, raise the camera up to your eyes, visualize the frame. And if you think you have the frame, try out a few more. And when you come back to the one that you had previously chosen, you will know it's the strongest composition. And I think that practice generally lends to better photos. And that's something that I tried to do here. If I came across this car, maybe I would have photographed the tire with the garland hanging down over the whole car or the horse on top. But I think approaching this scene and photographing the entire vehicle in its scenery, I think that was probably the best possible composition I could have made of this car in this lighting at this time. So this is a really interesting photo because it kind of goes back to the green one I talked about earlier, in the sense that this one doesn't have much depth to it. I did take it at a slightly angled stance, as you can tell from the leading lines going off to the angling down to the right. And what drew me to this frame and what led me to take the photo were these two instances of the glowing light that was bouncing from the adjacent building back onto this wall. So as you can see in the top left, you have this nice soft glow, and then more on the right, it's a more pronounced square geometric glow reflection from the sunlight bouncing off a window next door. And I think those two instances of the light hitting the building were incredibly jarring to me. And I decided to take a photo of it. And I think building off of that, the color palette of this photo, the dominant color is red, but then you have the green of the door and the tan of the windows, the way the sunlight comes in and gives it more of a warmer glow. And then obviously the geometric aspect to it, all of the paneling on the side of the building, it's very square. You have the square doors with the square windows, the alarm system, and the little circular light above the door is really the only circle in the photo. And I think playing with geometry and incorporating that into your composition is what makes the photo a little stronger than if this was a building with 5 different colors, no clear geometry or reason behind it. Yeah, and one thing I like about this photo a lot is the fact that it's removed from time. Looking at this photo, you really cannot tell when it was taken, and that's something that I am personally striving for in 2022, is to make photos that feel removed from time. I think it's very easy to find yourself photographing things that you see every day. You go for a walk around your neighborhood. There's contemporary cars in the photo. There's people on their phones in the photo, and that's something I'm trying to do less. In my opinion, what makes a really good photo is a timeless image. Really, it's the fact that you can pick up a photo from the 70s and from 2022 and not know when exactly the photo was taken. And I think that's something that this particular photo does really well. This was another something I was playing around with, and this is a little bit more of a complex photo than the previous red one. Here, there's a lot of geometry going on. The buildings, they're going every which way. It's a very chaotic image compared to the last one. The lighting is incredibly flat, but you do have a very distinct color palette. You have the yellow, you have the green, you have the blue. It's very beige. It's very boring, but I don't necessarily think that makes it bad. I think an exercise like this, where you're able to kind of look at a jungled mess of architecture and figure out how you can take a photo in that space that gives you depth, that gives you a color palette. I think the only thing that this photo is missing is a little bit more of dynamic light, but I don't think that was the point going through my head when taking this. It was more about the geometry, the color palette. And I did, I framed the building on the left on the third. You had the leading lines coming from the middle of the photograph, and the negative space of the blue sky I thought was really beautiful. When I was framing this up, I wasn't really paying attention to whether or not there were clouds or planes or birds in the sky. When I photographed this image and scanned the negative, I was really pleased with how this rich blue gradient in the sky played with the yellows of the building that was below it. So this photo, I think, is a little different from the rest. There is no clear color palette. It is very documentary style, a style that I enjoy taking very much. What drew me here was the odd American flag on the side of the building. The stars are a little strange. And when driving into the city, we passed this, and I photographed this at the very end of the day before we left. So the light had changed dramatically from when I had first saw it. And when I approached the scene at the end of the day, ready to photograph it, luck had it so the glow of the sun was kind of coming in towards me which you could see on the left side of the frame. And I had there's a lens flare which you could see kind of in the leaves of that tree, which I kind of cupped. I put some blinders on the side of my lens to reduce as much of a flare as possible. Obviously, I didn't quite nail it because the flare is there. I'm not a huge lens flare guy. I think it makes you cognizant that you're looking at a photo. And so that's why I tried to remove it. I clearly didn't succeed. I like the lines that the fence, it comes in from the outside of the frame, I guess behind the viewer. And then it kind of snakes along the bottom third over to the left. And yeah, this photo, it's nothing special. It's nothing overly complex, but the scene was nice. The lighting was nice. And I'm glad I took it. This photo here is really special to me because as I'm trying to be more intentional with my photography, I want to be in a position where my photos tell stories. And I think that this mailbox, which is just completely covered in those little poem magnets, is really beautiful, honestly, because some family or whatever decided to make their art on this mailbox in the form of poetry. And there's a lot of really interesting lines here. You have how little time you have. I am only jumping as my truest. More grass is tasty. Now, not everything is incredibly poetic here, but I think where the medium format photography really shines here is I am able to zoom in quite a bit on this image and look at the small vignettes, more of like a streamlined consciousness of whoever's mailbox this is, what they were thinking when they were placing the magnets to form poetry. And it tells a story. It's a lot deeper than a photo of a mailbox. It's a photo of a mailbox that contains someone else's musings, funny phrases or lines that the magnets presented to them, that they've rearranged in ways that made them happy. And to me, this is a photo that you can look at for a really, really long time, or one that you could blow up big on a large canvas and kind of just stare at it and read the words and kind of think what this family was thinking when they arranged the words in the way that they did. From a photographic aspect, I think framing this in the direct center of the frame was good, but also when I was framing it, I chose to use the car behind it as part of the frame. So you had the shadow leading you to the mailbox, and then the mailbox is white, the car is white, so it's not distracting or your eye isn't drawn to much else in the photo. The subject is clearly the mailbox. And piggybacking off of using photos to tell stories, this scene here with the boots in the gate in the holiday decorations, the story isn't a mystery. Someone left their boots on their porch, and a photo was taken during the holidays. That's kind of the story. But I think with the shoes there, maybe you can wonder about what job that person has or where those boots have taken them. It allows your imagination to play a little bit more than if those boots were missing and it was just a photo of a slightly ajar gate. So looking for those little details that add so much context, I think, is incredibly important into making a good photograph. The light here, it is a little flat, but I also don't think that was the goal for this photo. It was to definitely capture a moment that was able to convey some sort of story or emotion. And last but not least, This is one of my favorite photos I had captured that day. Probably one of my favorite photos that I'd captured in quite a while. And the reason is so I came across this old auto body shop that was completely empty. The sunlight was coming in, and I noticed the way that the golden light kind of grazed the wall in the back. And I liked the emptiness of it. I liked the way the light was looking, but when I studied a little harder, I saw this old classic car in the doorway there that the light was just touching. And I think if I was 10, 15, 20 minutes too late to the scene, that car would have been completely in shadow. The light wouldn't have been how I like it in this photo. And so I think it would have been a completely different photo. And I think that's also the testament to the spontaneity of photography and how being at the right place at the right time is more than just a saying. It's really kind of a lot of the game here. And the way I chose to compose and frame this scene to kind of build some context, obviously you have the auto body shop, but then between me and that was this pane of glass. And when you look hard at the photo, you can actually see my reflection in the top of the photo. You have my hat there, my hand kind of gripping the camera and the shutter button. But what I did here was I used my shadow in the reflection to draw attention to the inside of the scene. And I used the negative space of my reflection, the part that my body wasn't covering, to include the tree on the left and the street sign on the right and the blue sky. And I think having those reflections be a part of a photo like this, A, it adds context, but B, I think it just allows your eye to wander a little bit more. This is definitely a photo that tells a story, but I also think it's a visually pleasing photo. There's more to it than just a photo of an empty garage. And using the light, using reflections and my body positioning, I was able to create this frame. And that's something that I'm getting better at as a photographer, is examining my surroundings. And like I mentioned with the photo of the car and the Christmas decorations, is looking at a scene from every possible angle and finding the strongest frame to make. And I think that is exactly what I did with this photo here. So there you have it, guys. There's 10 photos from one roll of a trip I took to Solvang. Overall, it's very rare that you get a rollback with a lot of photos that you're happy with. But something that I'm trying to do, especially with the astronomically high film prices that we have been blessed with this year, thanks again, Kodak, is being more intentional, is raising the camera up to my face a couple times and then saying, you know what, this scene is not speaking to me. I'm not feeling a draw. And then putting the camera down and then walking away to another scene, especially with medium format, 6x7, which is what I shoot. I only get 10 photos per roll. And so I think that being more intentional, being more cognizant of the fact that, yes, I do have to develop, I do have to scan, I do have to edit. Is that worth this frame? Is that worth, a basketball hoop or a classic car taillight? And most often it's not. And so my biggest photography goal of 2022 is being intentional. It's taking the film supply that I do have and making art that says more than what I'm taking a photo of. It's adding context. It's adding a story. And I think that is something that I can work on, and also something I think that if you heed my advice, will start setting your work apart from other things that you see on social media. Well, this was probably a long one, but I really do appreciate you guys sitting down with me, looking over my photos, hearing my commentary on my work. I can't wait to do this again with you guys. Please remember to like, comment, maybe share it around. Help me with the algorithm. Means the world, guys. Thank you so much for supporting me. You can find my social medias in the description box below. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. That's pretty much it. So thanks for the support, guys. Happy New Year, by the way. And I will see you next time.